You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, episode 36. This week on the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, we're kicking off Season 2 of the show, and we're back to our weekly release schedule. This week, we're going to talk resident goose hunting as the September season's here. All right, welcome. We're glad everyone's joining us this week. We are excited to kick off Season 2 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. This is episode 36 of the show. We are your on-demand audio source for all things waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. If you'd like to catch up with the show and everything that we had going on in Season 1, you can do so through hpoutdoors.com. We're on iTunes. You can subscribe there and check out all of the older episodes. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of the social media sites. If you got a question or something you want to discuss with us here at the show, you can do so via our email at info@hpoutdoors.com. And one of our favorite things that we introduced last season was the Facebook Waterfowl Podcast listeners group that we have. And if you'd like to search HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast listeners group, you can join us in there where we chat all the time about a bunch of different stuff and waterfowl related topics and things like that. So definitely check us out there. And when I say us, of course, I mean myself and my partner in crime, Dan Harushka. Dan, what's up, man?
Tomorrow, the openers, tomorrow.
Okay. Guess we didn't know that you had a little singing chops there, but I think everyone gets a little giddy this time of year as the season, is kind of getting back into full swing in a lot of places, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and chasing resident geese and, just some tips and techniques that kind of go along with that. But we've got a bunch of new things that we're kind of rolling out for this season and some different segments and topics and things that we're going to cover. So we're really hoping that we can, improve from Season 1. We've taken some of the feedback that we've received and tried to implement that. And, just see what we can do this season to give you guys more content and keep you more engaged and, hopefully help you guys become better hunters. And one of the ways we're going to do that, something that we're really excited about, is we're going to be adding more content in the form of a brand new show/segment that we will be releasing weekly in addition to the podcast that you get every Monday. The new segment will be our Waterfowl Friday tip of the week. And this segment will obviously come out every Friday. Will come out through the same channels as the regular show does, iTunes and Facebook, same show channel, all of that. But what this segment is really designed for is, a lot of guys, they only hunt the weekends. They get Saturday and, maybe Sunday if your state allows it to get out in the field. And these tips are going to be quick, 5 minutes or less. We're going to give you something that you can take with you in the field that weekend and put into practice that quickly to hopefully help you be a little bit better hunter. So these are going to be topics that are, with the season, trying to stay current, things of that nature. So it's quick, it's easy, and hopefully really informative and beneficial for everybody out there. So I know I'm really fired up about this particular segment, Dan. It's something we wanted to try to innovate something a little bit different into the show for the new season, and I think this is going to be a really popular thing that we're bringing to the table this year.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, and one of the main reasons I think we started talking about the segments, and some of them are just mistakes that we've made. And if you listen to this on a Friday, that Friday night or, during the day, you can think about that. So Saturday, if you are hunting that Saturday or Sunday, whenever, you don't get out in the field and say, start cussing about something that happened. If we can help prevent that, then we're going to do it. And there's a lot of good tips coming your way on that new Friday segment. So I'm also excited about it.
Yep, for sure. And that'll be starting this Friday. So if you're listening to the show, make sure you check back on Friday and we'll, get our first running of that particular segment. So That's good. And, we've tried to introduce a couple new segments that we're going to do on the show here every week. And we're going to, not beat around the bush any longer, and we're going to get right into it. And if you've listened to us as we went through our monthly release period, you probably, you got a little bit of taste as we kind of piloted some of this stuff. But now that we're back in weekly release, full gun here, you're going to get these segments every week. And the first one that we're going to touch on is our What's News segment. And what this basically is, it's just a waterfowl news related segment where we kind of canvas the waterfowl world and find out, see what we can see, and any kind of noteworthy information that we think that you guys would enjoy, we're going to pass along. And we got a couple things to cover this week. And first of all, obviously Dan's a Pennsylvania hunter still, and I'm from there and I hunt there a good bit. And, I noticed, Dan, that the Pennsylvania Game Commission put out a study here recently, specifically talking about contaminant levels in waterfowl in the Lake Erie region. And, they collected a lot of samples, and I'm not going to get into all that stuff, but essentially they came out with some guidelines. And there's a couple different points in there as follows. One, the number one point, mergansers should not be eaten. So, I think that's probably something that a lot of guys already know, but just to kind of reaffirm. The second one, other diving ducks, and this is specific to these types of waters, if they're prepared properly, they should only be eaten occasionally. So, if you probably shouldn't be eating a steady diet of diver ducks if you're hunting in these areas due to the contaminants. And then 3, dabbling ducks and geese can be eaten safely if properly prepared. So, that's concerning to the sense that, the water is making an impact on the ability to eat the ducks that you harvest. But hopefully if you prepare them properly, you'll be fine. And proper preparation includes, skinning, removing fat, cooking to an internal temperature of 165 Fahrenheit, discard any kind of stuffing or anything like that if you use it to cook. And, just kind of being smart about your birds. If you skin it and there's something going on that looks funny or smells funky, use your best judgment there. But, some troubling news a little bit on the water contaminant front there for Lake Erie. So,
yeah, I remember, even growing up, and you probably remember from doing a lot of fishing in high school and whatnot, there were always advisories there. So, Lake Erie's made a huge rebound in the fishing world, and you always have a few guys that say, mergansers taste as good as, anything else, and which I don't agree with that, but now they really have to be careful if they are consuming a lot of them. So, like you said, you got to watch that out, and, between the avian flu that's going around and these contaminants, who knows? Like you said, it's a little bit troubling.
So what else you got as far as news for us, Dan?
Yeah, something that will help us on our yearly out-of-state hunts. The federal waterfowl hunting framework will now allow us to know the seasons as early as September the year before. So, people that are going out of state on hunts, it'll give you a lot better chance of planning at the right time. You won't be in the middle of a split, because now the states are most likely going to be setting their seasons in the spring. So, if we're going to Maryland or something, and instead of waiting until July or, trying to figure out the first or second split, we can figure that out a lot sooner. So that's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to complain about knowing about season dates and things earlier. I mean, sometimes it seems like they're the last minute the way it goes now. So that's all great news. Some not so great news, unfortunately, is there's some legislation going around up in North Dakota that would essentially take, Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, big groups up in that neck of the woods. It would take them off their seats, their guaranteed seats on the advisory board that makes conservation funding recommendations. So, there's already been separate legislation that passed that prohibits state agencies from giving money, to these nonprofits for land purchases or for securing easements for conservation purposes. North Dakota already bans nonprofit organizations from owning or leasing land. So, for whatever reason, it looks like they're kind of tightening the screws down on there. I'm obviously assuming it's budgetary, but that's unfortunate because obviously that's a really prime area that is a focus for a lot of those agencies that protect and focus on conservation. So not great news out of North Dakota there on that front.
No, and just politics in general sometimes get old. And speaking of politics, another thing that happened, and it does kind of go into our yearly hunt, is Maryland. Now they kind of are laying off their very strict baiting regulations that were once there. And it was kind of scary because you could be in the middle of a cornfield, a farmer just cut corn, and if you're out there hunting, they were pretty strict about saying that you were baiting waterfowl. So you really have to be, I guess I don't know how strict exactly it will be now, but I guess we'll find out. But they really have to be able to prove that you were baiting waterfowl to get in trouble for that.
Yeah, essentially the way the law worked before is you could be cited for hunting over bait and you legitimately would have no knowledge of what the bait source would be. So you didn't really have much recourse as far as defense when someone accused you of hunting over bait because you literally don't know where the source could be. So it's kind of, at least the way I understand it, is it feels more of like a due process where they, you're kind of more on the innocent until proven guilty. They got to prove that you were knowingly hunting bait, vice the other way around, I guess the way it's kind of been. But regardless, hopefully this new legislation provides a little more clarity because, I know some people had a really difficult time with that particular regulation in Maryland specifically.
Yeah, and there's so many. I mean, you go down through there, and everything's about cornfields. So, I mean, that's a tough area to police there in that regards.
Yeah. So hopefully that'll help out guys, in that situation. So, that's your weekly news segment. If you guys, that are listening to the show, come across something that you think's newsworthy and noteworthy, feel free to pass it along to us via email or social media. And if we agree with you, we'll use it on the show. And another segment that we're going to use on the show that's coming directly from the listeners this season is the Ask HP segment. And basically what this is going to be is a segment every week where we take a listener question that we receive via email or on social media, or if you choose to, you can call the HP Outdoors Waterfowl hotline. That number is 724-609-FOWL or 724-609-3695. So if you contact us with a question and we think it's a good one and it would be beneficial to everyone, we're going to use it on the show. If we use your question on the show, we'll send you a free HP Outdoors barrel decal just for helping us out and being part of the show. So if you want to hear your voice on the show, call the line. If you want us to speak on your behalf, just go ahead and send us an email, info@hpoutdoors.com, or on social media. So this week's question comes from Joel Long. And the Ask HP Outdoors question is actually sponsored and brought to you by Higdon Outdoors. Quality service innovation, that's Higdon Outdoors. Check them out at higdonoutdoors.com. So this week's question is, when setting up decoys, what species should I put together and which ones should I keep isolated? So we're going to break this down into kind of puddle ducks and diver ducks. And Dan, why don't you go ahead and handle the puddle duck portion?
Will do. Then I think he mentioned something about a confidence decoy in there too. So puddle ducks, usually what I do, if I'm in a 2 to 3 dozen range, I would like to keep a few separated. I don't want to mix them like salt and pepper on corn. Like I'll put maybe a group of 3 mallards together and a group of 3 woodies. So kind of, keeping them together but still being able to mix them. You don't want to split them right down the line, but mix them, but still have small little groups in there. If it gets over 3, you can kind of mix in and out. I don't, I just throw them as I pull them out of the bag. So, 2 to 3 dozen, kind of keeping little small groups within a mix. Over 3 dozen, do as you want. And as a confidence decoy with puddle ducks, nothing beats the Canada floaters. So I would put them upwind, kind of off to the side. You're going to find that ducks don't like to decoy over geese. So kind of put them, like I said, upwind where the ducks can come in. And that's just another thing for them to see too. So the Canada goose is a great confidence decoy.
Yeah. And, this particular question, this is our experience. There's definitely someone out here that's listening that said, I've had mallards decoy over Canada geese all day long, and it's not saying that can't happen, and not that there's no hard and fast rules, but these are just sort of our experiences. On the diver side of the house, my recommendation is there are several species that you should, in fact, keep isolated from the rest. Those ones would be, your golden eyes, your buffleheads at times. Those are kind of the big two that I like to keep separated a little bit. Some people will say canvasbacks need to be. I'm not really sure how I feel about that one. What I tend to do is I run my long lines of bluebills, and on those long lines, you can put, in my opinion, you can put bluebills, you can put redheads, you can put ringnecks, you can put canvasbacks on there if you like. What I choose to do is I run my long lines, and then I create pockets within the long lines of clusters of buffleheads, or clusters of golden eyes if they're around, or clusters of canvasbacks. One thing to keep in mind, though, is keep them in areas where they're visible, as far as on the perimeters of the spread, or depending on your wind direction, your blind location. Just, you're using those to draw attention. And, I think for the most part, if you want to use some Canada geese as well, depending on if you're hunting a shore blind or what have you, to kind of have them on the upwind side, like you talked about, just as sort of a visual pull, you can do that too. But I like to separate the buffleheads and the golden eyes, and the rest I pretty much just intermingle for the most part. So thank you to Joel for reaching out to the show and helping us out with this segment. And if you've got a question that you'd like to hear us tackle, please feel free to do so. info@hpoutdoors.com or any of the social media sites, and we'll be happy to take care of that. And we'll send you a free sticker as a thank you as well. Okay, another segment that is familiar to all of you who have listened to the show in the past, and it's kind of running its course, but there's still a few birds that we wanted to touch on before we wrap up our duck profile segment. So we're going to continue with that here for a few more episodes. And this week, we're going to profile the Ross goose. So without further ado, Dan, let's go ahead and do that.
All right, the Ross goose. The male's 25 inches, the female's 23. And the male weighs 4 pounds and the female is 3.6, so not a very big difference there at all. They are the smallest of the three varieties of white geese that breed in North America. The Ross goose is a small white goose with black primary feathers. The bill is a deep reddish pink and a variably bluish warty area over the base of the basal area. The legs and the feet are rose pink and the iris is a dark brown. And they are dimorphic, so the only way that you're going to tell the difference is the female is 6% smaller than the male. And the Ross goose has a relatively short neck and lacks the black grinning patch that is typical of greater and lesser snows. And that is what they are mostly mistaken with. So the Ross geese may be distinguished from snows by their smaller size, more rapid wing beat, and higher pitch call. And in regards to breeding, they breed in a low Arctic tundra, mainly near Queen Maud Gulf, southern Southampton Island, the western coast of Hudson Bay, and the Saguenay River Delta in Alaska. That's a mouthful right there. And they usually nest in colonies mixed with lesser snow geese, making their nest on the ground in sparsely vegetated areas. And not big egg layers. They're coming in the 3 to 4 range.
As far as their wintering and migration patterns, the Ross goose, or the geese, they are among the first to leave the breeding grounds in Canada. This California Central Valley is kind of one of their largest main wintering areas, but there's also increasing numbers that are wintering in Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, Texas, and the north central highlands of even as far down as Mexico. Food and habitat for the Ross goose is they tend to feed on grasses, sages, and small greens. They particularly like to feed on waste wheat and barley during the winter months. So there you have it. That's your profile for the Ross goose. All right, Dan. So we got a couple more weeks probably left of the bird profile segment, but that one will be kind of going away as we go through season 2. And, we're confident that we've got a lot of other good things coming up that will take its place. But we've had a good run on that, and we've covered a lot of different birds and a lot of different information. So pretty cool stuff that I think as far as that segment goes.
I've enjoyed it, and even talking to people when they ask what something is, and you can tell them the difference between species. That's always fun to have in your bag, and maybe in the future Pennsylvania will adopt a teal season due to our information getting out there.
Hey, you never know. I guess you never know. So
you never know. It's worth a shot.
That's right. If you've been listening to the show for any length of time in recent months, you know that we've introduced a new segment with Barton Ramsey of Southern Oak Kennels. The reason why we did that primarily was Barton was a guest on the show. I think he was episode, was it 8? Dan, do you recall?
Yeah, it was pretty early. Sure.
Yeah, it was 8. And to this day, that episode, it was our hunting buddies and retriever training tips, is our number 1 most downloaded episode that we've had. And obviously the listeners of this show are interested in hearing dog training tips, and we could think of no one better than Barton to do that. So we're excited to have him on for season 2. We're going to get quick tip training segments from him every single week on the show. And Southern Oak Kennels also has a listeners or a society group, I think they refer to it as, on Facebook, where if you have questions about training tips, training gear, what how to do certain things, you can go there, and there's really great discussion about how they handle all of their dogs, and clients of Barton's who have purchased dogs and are training, and going through the pains and the struggles of teaching these things to their pups. So great resource for this show. Super excited to have him. And why don't we go ahead and roll into this week's Retriever Training Quick Tip with Barton Ramsey, brought to you by Southern Oak Kennels.
Hey guys, this is Barton with Southern Oak Kennels calling in with your Retriever Training Quick Tip of the episode. I want to talk this week about introductions. Introductions are something that's very important whether you're working with a young puppy, which is what should be introductions, or you're working with an older dog that maybe hasn't been exposed to everything it needs to be exposed to. We need to try to set up our introductions as simply as possible. So whether it's decoys, live birds, gunfire, water, place training, four-wheelers, loading up, we tend to sort of lump all of these things in and try to do it all at once. And so much better if we can just simplify and say, okay, today in this segment of time, all we're really working on is sort of picking up live birds, for instance. We did that with a client, his puppy, just today. So what do we need? We need a bird. We need something to shackle the bird or tie the wings down or tie the feet together, pull the flight feathers, and need an area with the bird and be chased by the dog. And then what do we need to make sure the dog already knows? We need to make sure the dog's already retrieving. We need to make sure the dog's already running out and getting something, bringing it back to hand. We need to make sure the dog is already holding really well onto a bumper so it doesn't drop the bird. These are the 4 things we need to make sure the dog's already doing so it can handle the introduction that we're working on. And so it's just an encouragement that as you think about buck season approaching, dove season, whatever it may be, look at your dog and say, what has the dog not been introduced to that the dog is going to encounter in the field? I can't tell you how many times I've seen a young dog take off on his very first duck hunt, ignore the duck, and pick up a decoy and bring it right back because the dog had never seen decoys in training. And then I know of horror stories where guys have taken dogs out hunting for the very first time and have never been exposed to gunfire, and the guns go off and the dog just absolutely freaks out, runs all the way back to the truck, those sorts of things. You don't want that to happen. So run through your day and say, all right, in the morning we're going to be loading up on a four-wheeler. We're going to be sitting out in decoys. I mean, we literally will bring our dogs out to the yard, sit them on a play stand, and make them sit there while we set up 40 or 50 decoys and then tear down 40 or 50 decoys, just so the dog's used to the sounds, to the time to us chucking decoys in the water so the dog knows not to go get those decoys. There's tons of things you guys are going to encounter. So get out there, simplify, get your dog introduced properly. That way you'll have more success in the field this season.
Okay, Dan, being the dog owner of the two that actually hunts and doesn't stay inside and get ear infections all day, what do you think about what Barton went with there?
I mean, I think sometimes you get so excited about going out and training your dog that you just want to do everything at once. And, to really break down introductions on a yearly basis, getting ready for season, it's very logical. And, it's a great tip by Barton once again. And, I'm just glad that we brought this segment onto the show for sure.
Mm-hmm. And, it's one of those things where it's tough because, in our society, we're results oriented, want it now, not tomorrow type of deal. And the truth of the matter is it takes time and a lot of discipline to train a really well mannered gun dog that, like Barton said, is not going to be running for the truck when he first hears a gunshot or picks up a decoy instead of the bird, that kind of thing. So taking your time, making sure that they're comfortable with all of the phases of the hunt that they're going to experience is really, really important. And it's really a thing that likely gets overlooked a lot because guys are in such a rush to, get their dogs in the field and have that experience. But, without the legwork in the front end, you're not going to generate a good dog that's going to give you enjoyable results in the field when you get the opportunities to go. So,
yeah. And it's really, if you think about it, it's not fair to the dog because the first thing, you get him out of the truck and you want to put him on a quad and take him out or something, and you haven't introduced them to that, or they haven't seen it in 12 months and they don't do what you expect. It's not fair for you to get all huffy puffy at them. So, go through just think about your entire morning if you're in a rush or if you're not in a rush, and think about what the dog has to go through too. So, great tips there.
Yep, without question. So we're looking forward to more tips from Barton as the season goes on, and enjoy the insight that he's bringing to the show. So now we're going to talk about the main portion of the show that we wanted to get into. And last year, our very first episode that we ever did on the show, we talked about early season goose hunting tips. And a lot of things that we're going to cover this season, may be in sort of the general area of things we've covered on the show in the past, but we're really going to try to take an approach of covering it from different angles, putting different thought, different approaches to things in it. So, if you heard the episode last year, first of all, it was probably terrible because it was the first time Dan and I had ever done a show. So we hope that we've improved since then, but we hope that this season will also provide you new insight and new thought process about some of the topics that we've talked about before and some of the things we haven't talked about before. So let's go ahead and get into it, Dan. And this week we're talking resident goose hunting. All right, Dan, I got to make a confession here before we get going. Everyone obviously gets fired up for the first opportunity that you get back in the field and hunt waterfowl. It's been a long summer, been sweating, it's been hot. We're all aching for that fall, the cold, the chill in the air, that kind of thing. I got to be honest with you, there's a lot of times when the September season for me is just underwhelming. And it's kind of a letdown because, you look forward to it all year long. You get super fired up. You're cleaning decoys. You're doing this, that, and the other. And then the hunting can really be feast or famine. I mean, you may get some really great hunts, but then there's days where you don't do well at all in the early season for a number of different reasons. But, at the same time, you're out there, you're sweating, you're getting bit by mosquitoes, you're right there at the end of the summer, so you still have warm weather family type obligations pulling you here, pulling you there, that kind of thing. So for me, it's great to get back in the field and I do enjoy it, but it's not like mid-November through the end of January when I'm in the field. It's not the same feel for me. But we'll talk a little bit about how you can have more of those feast days than famine days, if you know what I mean, when you're targeting those resident geese that have been sitting on these same ponds and same fields and stuff all year long. So what do you think, Dan? You got something that you want to start this discussion with?
Well, I mean, like you, it does get annoying, going through the summer and sweating. It's supposed to be just mid to upper 80s the entire week, opening week. So that is definitely not a fall feel, and I would much rather it be nice and chilly like you mentioned. But, I agree with you on the feast or famine, and I think something that makes it really frustrating is that you watch these geese all summer long and you think you have them figured out, and that is just when they put you back in your place pretty much. Because you can watch them and they can be landing in fields for weeks on end, and then you try and get out after them, and the first time it might be someone else shooting at them too or something like that. But you can sit out there all day and not not see what you're expecting to see. So I agree with you. It can definitely be, some of your best hunts, and it can definitely be some of your worst, most frustrating hunts.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about, scouting a bunch on this show, and one of the reasons why it can be feast or famine is being in the right location in the early season is the number one thing. I mean, you can hide a lot of mistakes that you make in your decoy setup or your calling or anything like that by being on the X. And these resident geese, if you identify that particular X, it's not like you've got birds fresh to the area that are just trying to identify a spot. I mean, these are birds that have been hitting these same areas for months. So, if you're in one of those hot spots that they want to be in, it makes you look a lot better because you can cover up a lot of those issues. And, I think that's very helpful. But at the same time, when you've been watching them in these fields for the last several months, so have everybody else that's been driving around. So the competition to get access to certain fields and things can be very, very difficult. And, if you're on the outside looking in, it's a lot more difficult to run, quote unquote traffic in the early season on these resident birds, because if you're not where they want to be, not a real good chance that you're going to pull them off where they're looking to go if they haven't been pressured too much and that sort of thing. So, scouting becomes very, very key.
Right. And that's, I think we run it into the dirt, scouting and concealment, but it really is the most important. And like we talked before, you need to know where the X is. You could be off by, 100 yards, and that could make a huge difference in your day. So, scouting, it is the same as migrators when they come into town. Look for the roost, find out where they're going, where they're coming from, and, take the time to get out and follow them. And, if you follow them for a week and they're hitting a couple different fields, then, it might be a random shot at wherever you think that they're going to go, but you're going to have a lot better idea than just picking a random field that you have access to that they haven't used all summer long.
Right. And I mean, if you're having to overdo it on a resident goose hunt with your calling and your flag and all that kind of stuff, you're not doing it right, and you're probably not going to have a lot of success because, like I said, you need to try to scout to get on the X, and then when you're there, concealment. I mean, these birds have been using these places for months. If you got 3 or 4 or 5 big lumps of grass that weren't there, they're going to know pretty quickly, what's going on. So focus on your hide, see if you can utilize a fence row, see if you can utilize some uncut crops, get inside the corn a little bit, something to that effect. But, you don't want to overdo it because this is the first time these birds are getting hunted. And if they haven't heard, a competition style caller, sitting on these ponds calling the opening day of the season, if you're over there running through a routine, it's going to be alarming potentially to them. And that might be detrimental to your hunt. So just like anything else, read the geese, react to what they're showing you. But, when you see them in the distance, you should know they're using this pond. They're coming here. You don't need to run the call hot to get them to come in there, or at least you shouldn't.
And I tell you what, for the people not in the listeners group on Facebook, I've had between 40 and 80 geese in the field in front of my house, morning and night, which they're starting to get away from it the last week or so. But watching them, when you're talking about concealment, there's a few places to hide there, but more importantly than that, when there's birds already in that field and there's more birds coming in, there's not a sound made at all. And I've been watching, I'm not joking, for 3-4 weeks, and it might just be this group of birds, but I mean, there's no way that I would pick up a call and start going running it hot in early season after seeing that. I'll give a couple honks to if they're flying somewhere else and I need to get their attention, but if they aren't doing it, I'm not doing it. And it's really, I mean, it's been a good lesson for me just to sit there and watch it night after night after morning after night after night after morning. Just tons of seeing them and watching them, and that's my tip for the day is just try out a flag, try out not calling to start out.
So, what other tips do you have specific to that time of year that people should pay attention to, and that might help them become better hunters, have more success? And is there any of them that are sort of outside the normal scope? Something a little bit different, or something like that?
Talking about spreads, it'll be the same thing. Looking at, I don't think you need any more than 4 or 5 dozen decoys. Make sure that they're in family groups. We talk about it in the wintertime when they're huddled up compared to the summertime when they're nice and spread out. Some of these birds are spread out. I mean, they're probably spread out over 20 acres, and there's, there might be 60 or 70 of them. So make sure they are in, separate groups. I'd probably group them up 4 to 8 birds, probably 20 feet apart. And, you can mix in, try and get in a low-lying area in the field if you're in a field, or like you said, try and, really concentrate on that concealment.
Yeah, you must have been reading my notes, because I was about to say almost the same thing. Everybody, it's like a buzzword when you're talking early season geese and resident geese. Everyone wants to throw around that family groups thing. But you kind of wonder, how many people actually understand what that means? What does that mean that they're in family groups, and what do family groups do? I mean, that's something as a hunter that you need to learn, what the concept of a family group is and how they interact, not only within the group, but against other groups. So when you talk about space, I mean, these family groups they're there to feed their little group, and they don't want other family groups of geese encroaching on the space or the feed that they're there to get. So yeah, they have security with other birds in the field, but they're there to feed themselves. So, when you give that space, that's realistically giving, the perception of, hey, this is your turf, this is my turf, don't encroach on that. So, they need...
And I want to,
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I speak to that real quick? Okay, so the birds that have been out of my house, and I have no idea why I haven't, put a camera up on it, but there are... It's almost like 2 very distinct clans, gangs, flocks, whatever you want to call them, but they will not intermingle. There's probably, and it really is neat because they will, I mean, they're out there fighting almost like, bucks locked up, and they're chasing birds out of their family group. So if they found it, you're not going to encroach on it. And I don't know if there's some, the little ones are starting to fly and they're protective over them as well, but definitely it's a feed, protecting their food source, and they do not just need the space, but they want the space. They don't want to be around other groups of geese that they don't want to be around. So that was just another little tip there.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And, a lot of people think, well, I have to have this perfect little U or J where my blinds are to create this pocket for these birds to land in. And in the early season, that's not quite accurate. You need to have, if you're trying to be natural and replicate what you're seeing in the field, like you're talking about, they're spread over a long ways. They might be strung out over the entire field or half of the field. So that creates challenges as far as how you're going to get them to land, and maybe that's where your flag comes into play or something like that. But I think it's important to realize you have to give space. And one of the things that you can do to help combat that is moving your blinds towards the edge, the outermost edge of your downwind decoys, because like I said, the birds on the ground want their space. The birds that are coming into land want their space. So it's not uncommon to have birds land short of your decoy spread to kind of like establish their spot. And then they might walk up to you a little bit closer, but it's not uncommon to see them land outside the spread because they want their own space. They're not trying to get in that pocket. So make the adjustment with your blinds. Set your decoy spread as you typically would, but maybe not set your blinds right where you typically would. Get down towards that downwind edge so that when they do decide to, short your spread and land, they're going to be right in the kill hole for you. So think about that when you're scouting fields and you're seeing how the birds are set up and you're looking at the topography of the field. Think about how you can set it up a little bit differently, because I can tell you, every other person that's going to be out in those fields is going to have a U, they're going to have a J, they're going to have an X, they're going to have something set up, and the birds are going to get hip to that really quick. They're going to understand and see, okay, it's on, and now we got to be cautious, and you're going to see them start landing short of these spreads. And if you're a step ahead of them in that regard, you're going to be ahead of the game. So definitely take the time to understand the concept of a family group and what that means and how they interact. How is it different now than, what you're going to see geese do later on in the season? Because, a lot of guys I know, they're hunting dove, they're going elk hunting, they're doing other things in September and October when you see these types of stuff, and they're getting in the goose blinds later in the year, and they're hunting migratory birds. If that's all the experience that you have, you're not putting these tips that we just talked about, you're not implementing those tips if you get out on a September hunt. So if you're the one thinking about that, you're going to be the one that benefits from those. So keep that stuff in mind when you're out there, thinking about how you're going to plan out your hunt.
I want to make just 2 points off of what you were just talking about. If you do move out of the, the base of the U, or don't set up on a U, and this happened to us a lot last year. We were at the U, and, you and I both were getting on the call pretty hard when they were landing because they were still, 70 yards out. They didn't want to be in that U, and, they ended up walking up and whatnot. But, one, that's going to take your shots from 60 or 70 yards to, up in your face. It might be a swinging left to right or right to left shot, but you're going to be looking at a 20-yard shot. And number two, it doesn't hurt to get off the very bottom of that U anyways, because if they're coming in directly into the wind, what are they looking at? They're looking directly at your blinds. So to get them not looking at you, that's going to help in the concealment arena as well.
Yeah, there's no question. And, obviously if you're able to get set up with the wind or the sun at your back and that kind of stuff, that helps with that as well. But I agree, when you can get out of their main line of sight, that's going to be beneficial, especially when you're hunting a family group situation where you're, in theory, shooting at groups of 6 to 8 to 12 birds at a time. It's tougher to really capitalize on a swinging shot when you got groups of 40 and 50 coming in type of deal that you get later in the year. So I think that, the early season is a perfect time to get out of the comfort zone and try some different things because, like I said, these birds are smart. They're used to what they're seeing in these fields. So anything you can do to kind of deflect your presence there is going to help you without question. Another thing that I think is important in the early season is when you're scouting, not only identifying family groups and learning about them and how they interact, but there's more to the puzzle than just that in the early season. Sometimes in the early season, you'll see these flocks of 6, 8, 12, and then all of a sudden you'll see a flock of 15, to 30 to 35 come in at one time. And those are the flocks that you really want to focus on for one particular reason. Those birds are typically younger, more juvenile birds that probably didn't breed the first year. So they're kind of on their own. They don't have that family group per se. So they're going to more react to what you would likely see more similar in the later season where they're bigger flocks, a little bit, different as far as what their approach is to a decoy spread. They're younger, so they might be a little more cavalier, a little less cautious, things of that nature. They don't have young that they're looking out for and protective of. And, those kinds of flocks, if you can identify a field that's getting some of those, boy, you can really have a great hunt. So really kind of nitpicking the types of birds is important. And a lot of that, maybe you want to think, all right, this is a hunt that I know I got my son's baseball game at 9:00, so I got to be in and out this morning. There's a field over here or a pasture over here that I know there's 25 to 30 birds hitting, a couple different family groups. You get in there, you get your limited out or have a nice shoot on the first couple family groups, and then you can pack up and roll. You don't probably want to do that type of hunt where you're getting these larger groups of juvenile birds of bigger numbers, because you come in and then, a couple groups come in and you shoot into them. You might harvest a couple, but you're educating a ton of birds right there. And these are some of the dumbest birds, obviously, that are out there right now. And it doesn't do you a lot of favors to really educate a bunch of birds at one time. So maybe save those fields for dates when you can put more time into the field. And based on your scouting, you'll know birds are going to hit the field until this time of the day typically, and you can kind of scope your hunt around that to limit the amount of birds that you're going to educate. Because if these are resident birds, these are probably some of the same birds you're going to get cracks at throughout the year. So, you want to try to preserve that best you can. So think about those sort of things when you're planning your hunt and kind of decide where you're going to go and what you're trying to get out of that particular hunt. So just something that I kind of think about when I go through that process.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, or take a few buddies and have a really good shoot on larger flocks like that. And one thing that, early season, like you said, these are uneducated birds. They've never been shot at, most of them. So when you do shoot, most of the time leading a flock is a older bird. So if you shoot that, it probably has a couple, young ones with it, and get back in the blind. That's one time when, we don't mind letting birds lay is, after the first flock come in and we shoot at them, let them lay, get back in your blind, do a couple comeback calls, and most of the time you can have them swing around for, a second opportunity. And that's one of the fun parts about the early season.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of, in that same thing happens, if you're hunting in a pressured area where maybe a couple 100 yards up the way, there's another group hunting the other field. And you can really kind of pinball flocks back and forth because these are young birds. They don't understand what's happening. You put that extra little stress in their life, like we've talked about in the past, and they might just start to panic. And they're looking to get down somewhere. And, you can really capitalize on that. And if you shoot well, you can really do, collect some nice numbers when you get into a situation like that. So I agree with you. Definitely don't give up on them just because you shoot into them. Hang tight, stay in your blind, stay covered up real good, and see if they'll work back, and don't write them off right away.
Another thing that we get a lot of questions on, and we could probably even talk about this on the Ask HP section, but a lot of guys are just getting into calling. They're just learning how to use a short read. They're wanting to know, when can I get my feet wet? Resident goose, early goose season, I think is a pretty good time because you can kind of test them out. You don't have to get super loud. You don't have to get super fast at all. But, the first time I blew a call, that first honk, I was pretty nervous letting it out. I remember it. And I was like, man, I don't know if I want to make this sound because it, might flare it and ruin the hunt. So, I think, you can afford to be not perfect on some of these first rounders.
Yeah, I mean, within reason, obviously, if you're shooting into a flock and they're taking off, there's nothing that you're not going to hurt anything by, letting out some, honks or some clucks or, whatever you're comfortable with doing and kind of building your confidence in that regard. But, yeah, I mean, anything within reason and anything that's natural is a good time. So definitely can use that. The best time to practice, get used to that is, when you're in your car driving around, or we've talked about this on the listeners group, the looks you get, people think you're in there, smoking illegal substances or something like that. But, I'm well known for having a goose call up to my face when I'm driving around the suburbs of DC here. So, what else, Dan? I know, we're trying to keep this season. We're trying to keep the main episodes to an hour because sometimes we get a little long-winded, and we're trying to be more concise in our discussions. But what else with this resident goose season? I mean, heck, some states are already hunting as we're recording this. I mean, Minnesota, had a season come in August 8th. I mean, the seasons are getting earlier and earlier. The resident opportunities are getting greater and greater. So this is becoming a thing. I mean, this is becoming a more popular time to target geese. And we talked about this last year on the show, but the weather's warm. You're not going to go out there and freeze your tail off. It's a great opportunity to introduce kids. It's a great opportunity to take older folks that, can't handle the cold weather. You can do quick hunts. You can sit in corn rows and tree lines and things that don't require as much effort to keep you hidden. And, all of those are real positive things, about this type of, this particular season.
Yeah, and the liberal limits, we talked about it before, North Dakota 15 a man, New York 15 a man, down there in Virginia you have 10. The resident population here in PA is 8. And then, there's just numerous 5s, and I'm sure that there's more than what I just mentioned. But, it's fun to get some trigger time. It was a long time off, and, I was reading some figures out of New York, actually, and, just the amount of planes coming in and out of New York City is one of the reasons why they started such liberal limits up there of the 15. And I think that they kill, I want to say it's like 70,000 geese a year in the early season with this 15. So, that sounds like a good time to me, for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And, like you said, we're just, it's a great time to get out. Been sitting inside all year, all summer, not sitting inside, but not hunting waterfowl. And, I look forward to the season the day that it closes. I'm looking forward to the next season, and there's nothing that makes that harder than sitting in 95-degree heat or, doing that kind of stuff. So it's a great time. It's an exciting time. But I'm still looking forward to frost covered and skims of ice and that kind of thing. But, I won't be too picky, and I'll be out there, on Saturday, giving it a go here on the Virginia opener.
So you have all your decks built?
I do. I finished the deck, and that is no longer an obstacle keeping me from getting out in the field. So definitely good to go there. But,
I did want to talk about another thing. Just coming back into my usual question for everyone that we talk to is motion, and I've acquired some Higdon wobblers, which I'm super excited about. So, I bought 3 dozen of them. So I'm going to have, or not 3 dozen, I bought 3 boxes of them. So, a dozen and a half, 18 wobblers, adding tons of motion to my spread. And, I learned from some of the best out there, you need the motion. So I figured, why not? 18 decoys fit into one 6-slot bag. So, for if I have to fill up my minivan or my truck or whatever I'm taking that day, there's plenty of room to go around, and something that I was lacking before with a lot of motion of the full body. So excited about that, and trying that out on the opener.
Yeah, that particular product is cool because it's perfect for the quick hunts, the walk-in hunts, that kind of thing. You can carry numbers in one bag, quick in, quick out, lots of motion. Really, definitely a great product. So I'm interested to see, get your feedback on those once you get those out in the field. But, hopefully you guys are excited to get out. And if your season's not already in, hopefully it's coming in soon. And, share your pictures with us on the HP page or in the listeners group. And we'd love to hear the success stories. We'd like to hear the failure stories too. What went wrong? What do you think caused it? We can all learn from everybody's hunts, and we love to share that kind of information. And at the end of the day, we just love love to talk waterfowl hunting. So we definitely encourage anybody to do that. So you got anything else, Dan? Are we ready to close this segment up?
No, I think that was a good out right there. And like you said, if something didn't work, send us a message and you might be featured next week on the Ask HP segment there. So that could help us out. Get yourself a barrel sticker and, we could all learn something.
Yeah. And it's so cliche to say this, but I'll say it anyway. It's just like your teachers used to tell you back in school. If you're thinking it and you have a question about it, there's definitely somebody else out there that has the same question. So, we can all learn, all share. So definitely do that. And hope you guys have a great resident season, and hope you enjoyed our talk about hunting resident geese. All right, Dan, that pretty much covers the content for the first episode of season 2 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. What else you got for me? Anything before we close it down here?
Nothing real random. I'm super excited to get back in the saddle, so to speak. I think season 2 is going to blow season 1 out of the water here at the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, and I'm excited about that. We have, this was our first run with a lot of new segments, so I think it went pretty well, and I'm excited to keep it going and talking to you every week.
Yeah, this really makes it feel to me like we're back in season because, we started this show just about this time last year, and initially we were only going to do a monthly release, and then I think we did 1 or 2 episodes, and we quickly went into a weekly release, and it was just it's one of those things where it's part of my week. It helps me get through the week. It helps me look forward to hunts because we're talking hunting all the time. And, it's grown since then as far as the amount of listeners we have and the amount of interaction we have through social media and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited to get back into the weekly routine, get back into season, and, just hearing how everyone's season's going. So definitely excited about this season. Hope you guys enjoy all of the new segments and content that we're bringing out, and really hope you enjoy the new quick tip segment that we're going to be doing on Fowl Fridays, and definitely encourage everyone to check that out. We'd also like to thank the partners of our show that have at least in part made the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast possible. Sitka Gear, Sport Ear. At Sport Ear, you can use the discount code HP Outdoors and receive 10% off your purchase. DeLorme, you can also use the discount code HP Outdoors, which is case sensitive, capital letters, to get $10 off the DeLorme Earthmate app that you can use, and we've discussed in one of our previous segments a couple episodes ago, or last episode, I believe. Big Al Silhouette decoys and Higdon Outdoors. So thank you to them for their support of the show. One last thing that I'm going to say before we do our closeout here is, as I mentioned, we've been doing this show for about 1 year. It's a ton of work. We put in a ton of time, and we really hope that you guys find it beneficial and that you enjoy listening to us. We rarely make too many requests, but I'm going to make one right now. Everyone out there listening to this right now, if you can do one simple thing, I would be, and that Dan would be also very, very appreciative. If you can introduce one more person to this show and to waterfowl hunting. Find out, maybe it's a kid, maybe it's an older person, maybe it's a coworker, your brother-in-law, your cousin, whoever. Introduce one person this season to waterfowl hunting. And a great way to help them get into it is introduce them to our show. And that's part of the reason why we've done the new segment, which is the quick release. So someone that maybe they're interested in waterfowl hunting, maybe they're not, maybe they've looked at our show in the past and thought, well, it's an hour long, I don't want to listen to that long. This 5 minute, everyone can find 5 minutes somewhere in their day to listen to the quick tips and get a taste of what the show has to offer. So please spread the word, introduce one more person to the show, and we would be very, very grateful, for that. So that's all we got for this week. One of the changes is we are going to have this season is we're going to do away with the parting shot segment. So unfortunately, we're going to have some just kind of regular chat here before we close it out like we have today and kind of wrap it up. So Dan, anything else before we sign off here?
No, man. I wish you were coming up for the opener, but a Tuesday. Come on.
Yeah, the midweek opener is tough for me up in PA this year. So gonna do the Virginia opener, and we'll try to link up once it gets colder up there and we get some good diver action up there. I'll be coming up for that. So, all right. Thank you everyone for tuning in this week. We're looking forward to seeing you back here next week. Check out the Friday segment. And if you've got anything else in the meantime, feel free to hit us up. As always, guys, thank you again for joining us this week on the show. If you'd like to catch up with all of the information and the content that we have, check us out at HPOWDors.com. You can also subscribe to the show on iTunes, get all the old episodes, as well as leave us a 5-star rating review if you're so inclined. Check us out on social media. Join us in the listeners group. Lots of ways to talk with us. We really enjoy hearing from everyone and what they think about the show. So best of luck to you as you chase resident geese and you start the early season. And for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.